Hi there. My name is Owen Bastable. I'm a trainer with Project React. Thanks so much for checking out this short video on how to review expectations or your school-wide behavior matrix. This is a training designed for school teams, so PBIS team or a leadership team. There's three things I want you to get from today. One is how to revise your expectations. Two is give you some school examples and then give you a chance to practice. So why do schools do this? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but a few are. One is that your students and your parents that are coming to your school, there's new students every year. And so we want to make sure that our expectations reflect their norms and values. It can also be a way to identify maybe a hidden curriculum or biases that we may not be aware of. So that might be with language or images, and I'll give you some examples of that. And then also, if you're looking at school discipline data, you may identify some patterns in the types of referrals or behaviors that students are being sent to the office for that could be addressed through updating expectations. So you might focus in on those when you update your matrix related to, say, dress code or language. So I'm going to walk you through some steps on how to do this in kind of a systematic way. First is you want to locate where these expectations are posted, and here's some examples. Next, you start a process of assessing your expectations or current matrix, and here's some questions you might ask yourself as a team. Do the expectations that are posted in your school reflect any hidden biases? And I would think first of the adults or the folks that created it. And then you can ask yourself some other questions about the language that's used or imagery. And I'll give you some of these questions in a form that I'll share at the, toward the second half of this. The next step is to gather input from students, families, and community members. And this is really important. Sometimes schools stop with just relying on their team. And if you have the opportunity, it's great if you can conduct some surveys with family members. And I've shared two in this slide that I think are very useful, the family survey. And then there's some activities as well that you can find in a document called the Culturally Responsiveness Field Guide, which I'll also link at the end of this presentation. So I'd recommend doing that as part of your assessment. Next is once you've collected input from family members, teachers, students, is to take a look at the matrix you've got and identify some areas that you might want to update. So at this point, I'm going to give you a chance to practice this. This is a high school matrix. You can either pause, or if you want, you can move ahead with me at this point. So having looked at this for a few minutes, you can discuss which of these might need some updating, or may not be maybe ambiguous, or also may reflect some values or norms that may not be reflective of the students. So two that stood out for me were use of table manners and use of eye contact, which both could be very culturally constructed. And so you might want to unpack those and make sure that those do actually make some sense to your students and reflect their values and norms as well. So your final steps are you want to come to agreement and consensus. So this might be sharing a draft version that has all of the updates in it with stakeholders for final review. And then once you have that document, that final matrix updated, is reteaching and sharing that, of course, with students and staff. So here's another example from a middle school. And this school decided that it was going to update its technology and provide students with iPads, and they felt like they needed some expectations around iPad use. So you can see with the update they made, they actually included a whole column for iPads in different areas of their building. So now I'm going to ask that you give this a try yourselves, and this worksheet will walk you through how to do this with your team. So it's linked here, and it will be provided in a resource sheet connected with this presentation. The directions are pretty simple, as you're going to be reviewing a class-wide or school-wide matrix, and I'd really encourage you to do this with a representative team from your school, teachers, administrators, counselors, and so forth. So the first part of the worksheet is just identifying, writing down what are the current expectations. So for this school, Milton Elementary, you can see it's safe, kind, and responsible. And then you're going to answer some questions: is when were these developed, who was at the table, who provided input. So for this first question, this team from Milton Elementary found out that actually only 50% of the team that created this matrix is still at the school today. So that's a really useful thing to know as they start to consider this and consider changes to their matrix. Next, you'll see a list of critical features. This can be useful just for making sure that your matrix is communicating clearly what you want it to students. So things like, are the expectations memorable? Does it reflect community values or principles? So these are things you can look through with your team as well. And then there's some additional questions on rewriting the expectations to reflect values. So for example, adding language like be or we are, maybe more active and maybe more inclusive. And then you might think too, if in discussion, what are the things that are really important to your school? Well, maybe diversity is one. So in this case at Milton Elementary, diversity was very important. So they wanted to find a way to reflect that in their matrix. And then there's some more critical features to review. In this case, are these examples included in your current matrix? And if they're not, you might consider some areas for updates. And finally, you want to end with an action plan. So having gone through assessing it, how are you actually going to make the changes? Who's going to be responsible? And so here are some possible actions with some notes. And you can see for this school, the students telling the PBIS team that we need more updated language around cell phone use in our building because we're not clear about that. So this is most likely a high school. And so this is something that they probably collected from students during the assessment period or assessment process. So wrapping up, I want to leave you with two resources. On the left side is a one-page resource with links to some of the examples I gave today. It includes a link to this video and some other information that you would use to update your matrix. And then on the right side is the Culturally Responsiveness Field Guide, which is available online and is also linked here. And this will include some lesson plans and some of the examples I gave today as well. Finally, if you need to reach me, my email is here. If you have any other questions, please reach out to me. Thank you so much for listening, and good luck.